Okay, hi guys. Today we're going to discuss free will and where does it come from and how does it fit into these equations that I've been showing and the frequencies and the circlings and all that. So we're going to touch on circling direction again too. So this is coming from YouTube comments from my last video. So excellent. A couple of really excellent comments. So the first one from Gal Software is the handle. So he says, this seems for me a very machinery, so he means mechanistic representation. How can infinity of things that move in a very predictive way compose or represent the consciousness? Given state S of all circles, how does the formula explain the free will that would allow me to go and arrange my circles to a desired state S primed? What a wonderful question. That's really excellent, and we can certainly apply some math to that. So this is coming from the last video, which I presented this new animation on the left. This one on the right has been presented a lot of times. So this is what he's referring to, an infinity of things. So that's the circlings moving in a very predictive way. And, presumably it has some state S, and I will define what that state is in a moment. So how do you change it to a different state, which should correspond with a different experience of reality, right? And if this is so mechanistic, then where is the room for free will? Where is the free will in this, actually, right? Because I haven't actually described free will. Firstly, this is just sort of describing what the frequencies look like, how they originate. But you're right that we do need to discuss free will because this really just looks mechanistic. I mean, this is pedagogical. It's showing you the basic ideas of, Euler's formula and how a monad is structured and all that. It's just showing it the math of how it works. But yeah, you are right that where's free will in this? I mean, if it's an equation, it's just following these points. Well, what about free will? What an excellent question. Yeah, that hasn't been addressed at all. So, I'll just touch on the direction thing actually. So I made them clockwise. I just have an inkling that maybe the clockwise direction is better than showing counterclockwise. And as far as maybe there could be both, or maybe in the monadic domain, there's no real clockwise or counterclockwise concept that exists there. It's just rotation, although, I mean, that's kind of a bit of a stretch. With DNA, although of course DNA is material, it has what's called a chirality, and it turns a certain direction chemically as opposed to the other direction. And this just seems to be a brute contingent. Possibly there's an ontological reason for it on the other hand as well. So we're not quite sure actually why DNA has that chirality. So this could be an ontological brute contingent. It just ended up one way for all monads, or they do go both ways. Or in a video from a few years ago, I said maybe there's two worlds. Maybe there's one world of monads which rotate one way and another world which rotate the other way, and they're immiscible. Maybe they're not compatible worlds and they strictly stay separate from each other, almost as totally separate substances, and they're simply immiscible and they could never mix. They're a completely different world. So who knows? There's no real good answer to that. Could be a brute contingent, could be an ontological reason, could be two different worlds, could be a concept that doesn't exist for some reason, and maybe that's a bit of a stretch. So anyway, let's go back to free will. So free will. So for a few concepts just about free will, to discuss free will. So you have it because you're self-aware, and you have it to the extent that you're self-aware. I mean, it's really an equality, I realized, between self-awareness and free will. I mean, there would be no self-awareness without free will. Really, it seems like a tautology to me, a truthful tautology. So each circling, remember, is a thought. And thoughts are, by their nature of being a thought, it's a perceiving thing. A thought is synonymous with perception. A thought is synonymous with qualia, with perceiving itself. It would be meaningless to have a thought which is essentially not thinking if a thought isn't perceiving itself. It seems to me obvious, and I mean, this is maybe simplifying so way too much, given the length of history and writing and thought and effort that our geniuses have obviously put into the question. But to me, it seems quite simple now to simply just define it all tautologically, which ultimately is the only truth is tautology, right? We know from Hockney's writings and from Gödel's incompleteness theorems that a system of axioms cannot ultimately contain an absolute truth. The only thing which can be an absolute truth is a tautology. Thence you get ontological mathematics and explaining why there's something rather than nothing, and all that, right? So obviously the whole effort of Illuminism, right? So thought, yeah, so it's tautological, which is the only way to have a truth. And so thought is necessarily, by the very nature of being a thought, self-perceiving. I mean, it's not begging the question. I think it's just it seems like an obvious tautology to me. So thought is self-receiving, is self-awareness, is free will, at least to some extent free will. Obviously you have to organize a whole, like in a being like humans, you're organizing a whole bunch of circlings, a whole bunch of thoughts, and then expressing free will. But certainly at some levels, there was less free will when there was less self-awareness, and there's more free will with more self-awareness. Yeah, so each circling is a thought. Thoughts are self-perceiving by their very nature. That's what a thought is, and that means that they have qualia. They experience qualia. And if a soul, this is what a soul is all made of, then a soul monad is naturally a self-perceiving object of qualia, because it's all synonymous, it's all the same thing. And free will is simply synonymous with all that. So that's my statement summary of free will, at least as far as just describing the concept and the quality of what we mean by free will. I hope that's sufficient for you. It's sufficient for me right now to continue. So monad states. So what a wonderful question. Monad states, and he's saying S to S prime. I think this fellow who asked this understands a little bit of mathematics and how we do things in physics. So that's great. So you would have your basic monad structure, S, your monad state S, right? And your monad state S. Now remember, this first term in the exponential, those are all the frequencies. And so those are all the individual thoughts. This term, the second term, is the alignment of all those thoughts, right? That's the phase term, right? And so to change, so you can't really change what the frequency is, because the frequency is just the frequency and it's the thought that it is. But what you can change about that is its alignment with everything else. And so your state S is the function, is provided by the state of your phi, the function of phi for that S state there, that phi's distribution, the distribution of phi for this monad, for R at this current time for this state is its state, right? We get it? A lot of redundant statements there. So monad S prime then is simply just a different state, an S prime state of phi of R, right? And so that is what is being conveyed here, which we've seen in the previous several videos, where this is the phase on the y-axis and the x-axis is the frequency. So it's the frequency's phase, it's the phase as a function of frequency, right? And each frame here in this GIF could be considered a lifetime. The frequencies are bouncing all around and solving themselves and getting all lined up, right? Still, this isn't describing where free will comes from. We're just acknowledging that this must be the process, or a process that would be happening given the equations for ontological mathematics, right? And so, yeah, this is representing going from an S state to an S prime state, actually a bunch of S prime states, a bunch of states are changing, right? This is going through a whole sequence of states from the beginning to the end state, from the alpha state to the omega state for this monad, right? Okay, great. So of course here is one particular state, and then here would be another particular state. So this could be state S, and this could be state S prime, right? Wonderful, good. So, how does this generally happen? What happens through lessons, pain, and suffering generally through lifetimes, right? Okay, that's great. We acknowledge that happens, but the question was, where does free will come into this? And so as a being with free will, it means you have agency. You have agency to change your thoughts. You have agency to make choices, right? This isn't supposed to be here yet. Bottom here, who cares? So the monad S and monad S prime state, so phi of S of R, so the state of phi of R, or the S state phi R represents a given arrangement of thought. Phi S prime of R represents a different arrangement of thought, right? And so you as an agent with free will, you have agency to change phi of R. Generally that phi of R represents your personality. And of course, in your lifetime, you know that your personality changes a little bit, right? I mean, certain things get fixed in, other things change, and of course your physical environment changes, right? So you have agency to change phi of r, and that includes changing your personality. I mean, really, it really represents your personality in a big way, but in the shared domain, it represents, physical states as well of your environment. So at a simple level, I mean, you can give yourself a choice and determine an answer, and that determines a future phi s prime, should have a prime there, state for yourself and for your environment. I mean, these are minor exercises of free will, and generally this is occurring automatically in life. I mean, you can give yourself a problem, give yourself a choice right now. I'm going to go to the farmer's market for coffee, or I'm going to go to Starbucks for coffee. So which one are you going to go to? Evaluate and make a decision. I mean, that's a very minor exercise of free will. You're giving yourself a choice and making a determination. And these are so minor that they can change. I can start driving to the farmer's market and be like, oh, you know what? Let's just go to Starbucks for whatever reason, right? And so, yeah, not that big a deal. But really changing S to S prime, true free will, would really mean changing your personality actively. Changing your personality. That's really what it does. And of course, that is changing your personality. Well, what's that? That is obviously the evolution of your monad from a state of disorganization of its thoughts to a state of organization of its thoughts, right? That's what we've been discussing the whole time, right? So that's happening naturally all the time, from lifetime to lifetime generally. And so, yeah, I've merely stated it as a fact that free will is simply a property of your existence. It is simply a property of thought. Thought being a frequency, being self-perceiving, necessitates free will, because with perception comes the ability to choose different perceptions or choose new experiences and new perceptions, for example, right? So I got a couple videos. Let's just watch a couple videos which are about changing your, basically what they're talking about is changing your phi state to a new phi prime state, right? In the first video, and I think in most of these videos these days, they're using the modern language of New Age quantum mechanics, right? So they're talking about observation causing collapse, and it doesn't actually work that way, but as a heuristic, it's good enough. So what they mean when they're saying, your observation or your current state that you choose for yourself determines the way that the quantum wave function collapses for you, right? I mean, that's an effective enough heuristic to think of it that way, I suppose. But really what they're talking about is what you're actually doing is you're simply changing your state, your phase state, your phi state from one state to another state. And in doing so, you are changing your perception and experience of reality, right? And changing your personality, right? That's what you're doing. So let's watch those videos.
This physical material world around you is literally just a bunch of possibilities existing, like electrons, particles existing in superposition of each other. So they're existing as possibilities until they are observed by an external observer. And
so of course, what it really means is that there's any potential phi state that you can choose to go to, and you can go to it. That's really what it means, right?
And then they collapse into matter, okay? Physical matter. So quantum mechanics has shown this. We collapse the wave function of a particle.
And of course, that's just a heuristic. That's not actually how it works, but for intents and purposes, it's a heuristic that works. And anyway, she's going to get to some better points now.
When we observe it, through our observation. And we're literally just all bodies made up of consciousness and atoms vibrating at different rates of vibration. Everything in the universe is made up of atoms, and everything in the universe vibrates. The Hermetic law of vibration states nothing rests, everything vibrates. So everything in the universe, it's basically 99% empty space or possibility. What you're experiencing in your physical reality as like a physical experience is a byproduct of the observations you've made in your past. And we'll get into this more in a second. So the reason that the universe is basically set up as an algorithm is because you can think about the algorithm on your phone. Let's say you're scrolling through social media. If you're scrolling and you pay attention to something, you let your emotions get triggered by something, and you feed your life force energy in the form of your attention, your emotions, into a specific type of content, the algorithm is going to keep spitting that content back out at you.
So of course what she's going to say is choose new content, which effectively means choosing a new phi s prime of r state for yourself. That's what it's about. That is really true free will of actively engaging in your evolution rather than letting it occur from lifetime to lifetime, very slow process, very hard lessons. See, we're really approaching a collective gnosis state now with these sort of ideas, I suppose, percolating out there more and more, right? We can now actively choose what phi s prime state we want to exist in. And we can do that because we have free will, because we are becoming now so self-aware, and our free will is increasing to such an extent that we are realizing that we can do these things now. So this girl has a really interesting point to make. I really liked it.
This is literally working with your human avatar so that you can create an energy shift that then affects reality. As I said, everything starts.
So what's that shift? That shift is changing your phase state, and that changing that phase state changes your personality. And that's what these girls are talking about.
In here. What is this? This is energy. So if you can change the energy about something, it will manifest in a different way. Meaning your reality that has manifested from your energy will manifest in a different way. Okay, mastering your mindset, mastering your energy, and then you can manifest what you want. Manifestation is mindset and energy combined. I mean, it's not a ritual, it's not a practice, it is a lifestyle, it is a mindset that you have, okay? It is an energy that you have about you. And by doing these next steps, you will find that things will quite literally just change in front of your eyes. And once you prove that to yourself, like once you see the first thing change, you realize that it's really not that deep and it's really not that difficult. And I used to say that all the time, it's not that deep. We're on a floating rock. We are balls of energy inside a human body, and we are living, and everything started from us within the energy, so it's time to start using that. You know what I mean? So
So it's great, right? So these girls are actually really discussing deep ontological mathematical principles, right? And here we can explain them, right? And describe exactly what the change is. The question is, where does free will fit in? Free will fits in that, of course, as I said, you're an agent, and you can change. Basically what you're doing is you're changing the position of your circling points on its circle, right? And of course the point of evolution is to get that lined up for yourself in phase, not lined up on here. There will never be a lined up on here because these are moving at different angular velocities. So it's sort of like a hidden variable in the inside that you can't really observe or see, but it's in there. It's inside you somewhere. And yeah, that phi, those phi's all get lined up, right? Is the process. And yeah, so as I said, generally that happens lifetime to lifetime or very slowly through a life as personality changes, as you learn hard lessons. And it's difficult, and you have to force these changes into your phi state. And these changes can be very darn difficult to have to go through, right? As they get sorted out, as you learn those lessons. But then at some point, maybe you develop the level of self-awareness to be able to start directing the way you want your personality and experience of existence to go. And you do that with sort of techniques and thoughts and systems that these girls, for example, and I mean it's all over the place now, are presenting. So I'll have a link to those two girls' videos, and you should watch them. They're really good. You should watch their whole videos to sort of get the idea and see that, well, you know what, there is actually an ontological mathematical basis to what they're stating here. And yeah, they might, like in that first one, use not strictly correct language, but heuristically it's effective and good enough. All right, so I hope that was, informative on the question of free will, and we will talk to you guys later. Of course, support and books, and you all have a good day. Bye.